Welcome to the Story Exposed YouTube page. Did you know over 90% of our viewers don't subscribe? If you enjoy this video, please subscribe and hit that like button. We're targeting 500 likes on this one. Let's dive into today's tale. A marriage is supposed to be built on trust, love, and companionship. That's what I believed when I married Daniel 12 years ago. I was young, hopeful, and convinced that we would build a life together. That would stand the test of time. But life has a way of proving that nothing is ever as simple as it seems now. As I sit here reflecting on the choices I made and the consequences that followed, I wonder if things could have turned out differently. Maybe they could have. Or maybe this was always where I was meant to end up. Daniel was a good husband, in many ways. He was responsible, hardworking, and always made sure we had a comfortable life. He wasn't the most romantic man, but I never expected grand gestures. What mattered to me was that he was loyal and dependable for years. I convinced myself that was enough, but over time, something inside me changed. Maybe it was the routine of our daily life, the predictability of our conversations, or the way we had slowly stopped looking at each other the way we once did. Somewhere along the way, we became more like business partners than a couple in love. At first, I ignored the feeling. I told myself that every marriage goes through phases, that it was normal to feel disconnected sometimes. But as time passed, the emptiness inside me grew. I would lie awake at night next to Daniel, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he even noticed how distant we had become. Maybe he did, but if so, he never said a word about it. And then one day, I met someone who made me feel seen again. His name was Adrien. It wasn't planned, and it wasn't something I went looking for. It just happened. He was a friend of a friend, someone I met at a small gathering I attended out of obligation rather than genuine interest. I almost didn't go that night, but now I wonder how different things would have been if I had stayed home. Adrien was different from Daniel in almost every way, where Daniel was quiet and serious. Adrien was lively and full of energy. He had a way of making people feel important when he spoke to them, like they were the only person in the room. The first time we talked, it was nothing more than polite conversation. But there was something about him that made me feel awake in a way I hadn't felt in years after that night. I didn't expect to see him again, but life is strange and our paths kept crossing. At first it was accidental, a chance meeting at the grocery store, a quick greeting in passing. But then the accidental meetings started to feel less like coincidences. Maybe we were both drawn to something we didn't fully understand yet. I don't know when exactly it turned into something more. Maybe it was the day we sat in a coffee shop talking for hours, as if we had known each other forever. Or maybe it was the way he made me laugh. When I hadn't even realized how much I'd missed that feeling, it wasn't dramatic or sudden. It was slow, like a seed planted in the back of my mind, growing a little more each day. I told myself that there was nothing wrong with it, after all. I wasn't doing anything inappropriate. I was just talking to someone who made me happy, but deep down I knew better. I knew that if I had to keep it a secret from Daniel, then it wasn't as innocent as I wanted to believe. The guilt started as a whisper, something easy to ignore. But as my conversations with Adrien became more frequent, the whisper turned into a voice I couldn't silence. I would wake up in the morning and check my phone before even saying good morning to my husband. I would find excuses to step away just to read Adrien's messages, and with every laugh, every moment of connection, I felt myself slipping further away from the life I had built with Daniel. I didn't mean for it to happen, but the truth is it did, and once you cross a line, there's no going back to the way things were before. I wish I could say that I stopped myself before it went too far, that I realized the risk I was taking and walked away before it was too late. But the truth is I didn't. By the time I fully understood what I had done, I was already too deep to turn back. I remember the first time I truly betrayed Daniel, not just in my thoughts or emotions, but in reality, I had told myself for weeks that Adrien was just a friend, that there was no harm in talking to someone who made me feel happy again. But the moment I chose to meet him in secret, I knew I had crossed a line I could never undo. It was a rainy afternoon, one of those days, where the sky feels heavy and the air smells like wet pavement. I told Daniel I was going to visit my sister, which wasn't entirely a lie. My sister did live in the same direction, but instead I drove to a small park just outside the city where Adrien was waiting for me. I remember the way my hands trembled on the steering wheel as I parked the car. I sat there for a moment trying to convince myself that this wasn't a mistake, that I was just meeting a friend. But deep down, I knew I was lying to myself. Adrien was already there, standing beneath a tree to shield himself from the drizzle. When he saw me, he smiled, an easy, familiar smile that made my heart ache in a way I couldn't explain. I stepped out of the car, and as soon as I reached him, he took my hand. I should have pulled away. I should have told him that this was wrong, that I couldn't do this to Daniel. But instead, I let him hold my hand. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years alive. We talked for hours that day, sitting on a bench as the rain softened into a light mist around us. We talked about everything and nothing. At the same time, I told him about my life, my marriage, the way I felt invisible in my own home. He listened in a way that Daniel never did, as if every word I spoke mattered. And then as the sky darkened, he looked at me and said, "You deserve to be happy." Evelyn, hearing my name on his lips like that with so much softness, sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, as if he truly believed them, as if I deserved more than what I had. I don't know who moved first. Maybe it was him, or maybe it was me. But the next thing I knew, we were close, too close. My heart pounded in my chest. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Daniel. I wasn't thinking about right or wrong. I was just thinking about how good it felt to be wanted again. I wish I could say that was the only time. But once you let yourself fall, it's impossible to stop. One meeting turned into 2, then 3, and soon I was living a double life with Daniel. I was the same wife. I had always been cooking dinner, making small talk, pretending that everything was normal. But with Adrien, I was someone else entirely, someone lighter, someone free. The guilt didn't disappear, but I learned how to silence it. I told myself that Daniel didn't notice anyway, that he was too caught up in his work to see the change in me. And maybe that was true, at least for a while. But then things started to unravel. It started with small things that I could ignore if I tried hard enough. Daniel's questions became a little more pointed. "Where were you this afternoon? Why didn't you answer your phone?" I told myself he was just being nosy, that he had no reason to suspect anything. But deep down, I knew better. Then one evening, I came home later than I should have. I had met Adrien after promising myself I wouldn't, and time slipped away from me. When I walked into the house, Daniel was already sitting at the dining table, staring at his untouched plate of food. "Where were you?" His voice was calm, too calm. "I told you I was with my sister." I lied. He didn't say anything. At first, he just looked at me, his eyes searching mine, and then he pulled his phone out of his pocket and placed it on the table. The screen was open to a message, one that made my stomach drop. It was from my sister. "Evelyn wasn't with me. Today is everything." Okay. I felt the blood drain from my face. My mind raced for an excuse, a way to explain, but I had nothing. My hands trembled as I set my purse down, my heart pounding so loudly that I was sure he could hear it. I went for a drive. I finally said, my voice barely above a whisper. Daniel leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Try again." And just like that, the fragile world I had built with my lies came crashing down for the first time since this all began. I saw the hurt in his eyes, the betrayal, the quiet devastation. It was different from anger. Anger would have been easier, but this was the look of a man who had just realized that the person he loved most in the world had been lying to him. "How long?" he asked. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Daniel." "How long, Evelyn?" His voice cracked on my name. I couldn't lie anymore. "A few months," he exhaled sharply, as if the air had been knocked out of him. He rubbed his hands over his face, shaking his head. "I thought we were okay," he whispered. "I thought we were just going through a rough patch." I wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that it wasn't about him. But how could I? The truth was, he hadn't done anything wrong. He had been the same man he always was. I was the one who had changed. The silence between us stretched endlessly. Finally, he stood up. "I need some time," he said, his voice hollow. "I can't do this right now," and just like that, he walked away. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring at the empty chair across from mine, my hands shaking. This was the moment I had feared for so long, the moment I knew would come eventually. But no matter how much I had prepared myself, nothing could have made it easier. That night, Daniel didn't come to bed, and for the first time in months, I didn't reach for my phone to text Adrien. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, drowning in the weight of everything I had done. The next morning, Daniel was gone. His side of the closet was half empty, his toothbrush missing from the holder. I found a note on the kitchen counter. "I need space. Don't contact me." I should have expected it, but seeing the words in his handwriting made my chest tighten. I sat at the kitchen table, the same place where we had shared breakfast 1,000 times before, and realized that I had broken something I could never fix. Adrien texted me that morning, asking if I was okay. I stared at the message for a long time before finally typing out 2 words. "It's over." I never saw him again after that. It's been a year now. Daniel never came back. The divorce papers arrived in the mail a few months after he left, and I signed them without protest. I didn't fight for him because I knew I had already lost him. People ask me if I regret what I did. The truth is, I don't know. I regret hurting Daniel. I regret the pain I caused. But do I regret Adrien? Do I regret feeling something I hadn't felt in years? I still don't have an answer. All I know is that choices have consequences, and some mistakes can never be undone. Some days I wonder what would have happened if I had chosen differently, if I had spoken to Daniel instead of seeking comfort elsewhere, if I had tried harder to fix what was broken instead of running from it. But wondering doesn't change the past. Daniel moved on. I heard through mutual friends that he relocated to another city, started a new job, and even began dating again. I don't blame him. He deserved better than what I gave him. As for me, I live with my choices. The house feels emptier now, even though I was the one who wanted something more. I thought I was missing excitement, passion, something beyond the everyday routine. But what I had with Adrien was never real. It was just an escape, and in chasing that feeling, I lost the one person who truly mattered. I don't know if Daniel will ever forgive me. Maybe he won't. Maybe he shouldn't. But if I could say one thing to him now, it would be this. I was wrong. I see that now, and I am sorry. Life goes on whether we want it to or not, but some mistakes follow us forever.